I will quickly introduce our moderator, Mr. Amit Maheshwari. He's a trusted advisor to Fortune 500 companies, listed multinational startups and NRIs specializing in cross-border tax and regulatory strategies. His expertise spans FDI policy, transfer pricing, mergers and acquisition, inbound and outbound investment structuring, and much more. Beyond his advisory role, Mr. Maheshwari is an accomplished author and a regular speaker at international forums. His contributions to leading publications and TV channels make him a prominent voice in the field of international taxation and structuring. We are honored to have such a stellar panel with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a warm round of applause. And with this, Mr. Maheshwari, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all of you. And thanks to Arun and the entire team of Tax Sutra for putting up this excellent panel, which I have the pleasure of moderating. So as you all know, India is going through an excellent time. We are the beacon of hope in the entire world. Our economy is doing really well. And because of that, a lot of multinationals have started looking at India with an entirely new lens. In fact, I used to say that India was not even a point in a PowerPoint, but now it is a point in every PowerPoint. As I travel internationally, whether it's Japan, US, UK, everyone is talking about India. So with this, we have a group of questions. We are going to cover or try to cover almost all of them. They are very topical and talk about cross-border investments and structuring. The panel has already been introduced. To save on time, I won't do that, and I will straight away jump to the questions we have. So my first question to Mr. Rahul is that India is, of course, doing very well in terms of our fiscal policy, our stock markets, and barring the last few weeks, the stock market has been on an excellent run. Several startups have listed in India, which has given chance to retail investors to invest into the Indian stock market, which they never had. The only option was to invest as an HNI or accredited investor into VC funds. But now you can invest into a Zomato, a Paytm, and many others. Now what that has caused is that a lot of startups which had flipped to the US are now coming back and shifting their headquarters or holding companies back to India, which we call as a reverse flip. So this is a very interesting trend. We have cases like Pine Labs, Grow, PhonePe, and Razorpay, and many others who are now shunning the old structures of externalization and coming back to India. Of course, at a big tax cost and sometimes regulatory aspect as well. So my question to you is that why did startups at the first place flip to countries like US, Singapore? And then probably the part B of the question is that why do they want to come back and what are the tax issues around that?
Thanks, Amit. Good afternoon, Gurgaon. Thanks to Tax Sutra and the entire organization team for getting me on the platform. Let me first of all give a disclaimer. My views are personal in nature because being part of listed companies, even for Mr. Simanchal, it's personal views and may or may not be of my company or my management. So let's step back, Amit. I mean, let's step back 15 years in the old economy regime when we as tax professionals were extremely creative. We used to have those double dip sandwich structures. Indian headquarter companies going abroad, Mauritius, Netherlands Corp, Netherlands Corp into Hungary, Swiss branch. I mean, all double dip, triple dip, whatever we all planned everything, right? The entire dream was sold to the entire world. That in India, the ATR would be reduced. The repatriation would be very easy. You can go and go look at NASDAQ listing. That was a dream. The funds were available, surplus funds overseas, the effective tax rate was very less. R&D benefits were available in most of the jurisdictions, Ireland, Tech Switzerland, more robust jurisdictions. The same situation went with startup. I mean, startup, whatever they have done so far is not something new. It's all offshoot of the past. I would say the past intelligence which everybody had. Innovation, protection, talent, everything was there in India, but somehow the regulations in US or other developed nations propelled the startups to go overseas. And as they say, on a lighter note in Namaste London, साफ सुथरे लंदन में रहना है लेकिन दामाद तो हिंदुस्तानी चाहिए. So ultimately the dream of coming back to India always remained. because now the capital is there in India. So we looked at companies doing externalization and now internalization, and international has a lot of challenges in terms of tax. We have seen phone paying the cost of that. And there also I want to give a example from Mahabharata. Mahabharata mein Krishna, as a negotiator, went and said, just need 5 villages and the war will not happen. This 5 villages is a fair share, and I think the Indian companies are now matured enough to pay that 5 villages to the government, wherein it's going hand in hand with the government so that the reverse flip can easily happen. Tax is not considered as a bad cost today. It's a good cost. We have to live with it. But at the same time, there are benefits in terms of reverse flipping. There are cost issues, tax issues which are involved in reverse flipping in terms of cross-border merger or in terms of share swaps, which also have a huge tax implication. But those things we have seen in today's arena. Companies now know that capital is available in India. The talent is in India. The Indian regime is much more favorable as compared to the global regimes. Today we are not, I would not say we are China plus, we are different from China. We have migrated from OECD. I think I just want to give a flavor also of BEPS Pillar 2. When we were signatory to BEPS, situation was different. Today we are in a driving force. We can negotiate better with the world, and through this, I think the reverse flip is definitely adding value to the entire economic benefit.
Great, thank you. And I think we have these cross-border regulations which were released by RBI earlier. But recently what has happened I think on 17th of September, we had the MCA notification which fast-tracked the mergers, inbound mergers. And earlier there was a long waiting period for the NCLT. It used to take 17 months, 18 months. But now with the fast-track merger, you don't need to go to the NCLT. So I think the government also has realized this. There's a lot of value which can be created, and our markets would greatly benefit from the depth of retail participation, and especially these new age companies which have a lot of float. I think one of the good thing about these companies is that the promoters or the founders really don't have much shareholding, and it is open. They can really float it into the market, which is not the case for traditional corporates. So how do you think that this trend, reverse flip, would continue? And if yes, then with this NCLT move, then now you don't need to go to the NCLT. Do you think it will fasten up the process?
So let's look at how the economic climate is currently in India as well as in the US. Okay, both are now focusing on the self-reliance. India, from an Atmanirbhar perspective, I don't so much support Trump, but in terms of Trump being part of the self-reliance as far as the US is concerned, would definitely help these kind of moves. You basically make investments in India, you generate profits, and then you are basically matured enough now to give a fair share to the government. So I would say that companies have matured enough now to set up operations in India, pay the taxes on all the reverse flip, maybe through a merger process or a share swap, and merger with, which is now expedited through the fast track route, which I guess it's not implemented so far. It's still at a draft stage, right? As far as Companies Act is concerned.
It just came.
Yeah. So that will definitely help. If you recollect, 15 years back, there were 3 or 4 jurisdictions which are allowing cross-border merger. It was Mauritius, Netherlands, Antilles, BVI. Singapore was a little bit gray area. They don't call it a merger. They call it as a liquidation through merger. So those limited jurisdictions were there. Now things have changed. People are willing to accept outbound merger. And with NCLT, if it's going to expedite, obviously it's in favor of the companies to go for a cross-border merger and close the deals.
Great. And I think one thing to remember is that once you do that, of course, it becomes an Indian company. So reverse flip happens, become an Indian company. So the stock option pool which the employees have would now be governed by the Companies Act. So the earlier stock option pool ESOP plan is no longer good. And then you have this 1-year cliff on vesting period, promoters ESOP, which are not allowed. So all those regulations have to be followed with. There are some exceptions for DPIT registered startups, but I think the startups which are doing that are pretty large, and they no longer fall under the definition of DPIT registered startup. So I think that's very important to do. And I think last point is, of course, even if your inbound merger becomes tax exempt, it is not necessary that it is exempt in the country from which you have done the merger. So the shareholders in, let's say, in US or Singapore, Singapore probably not, but in US, they might be subject to tax as well. So that's very important. And there was a recent, which I just wanted to add, the Padmanabhan Committee on IFSC, they recommended making IFC as very attractive for internalization. So that's something to watch out for. It was just a recommendation, but not yet finalized. And lastly, I think once you do these reverse flips, one very important point comes up, which carries me to my next question, is on Press Note 3. So once you do that, you need to check the applicability of Press Note 3, which will become applicable on the investors of the Indian holding company now. So this is a question probably to me, Mr. Loda. I think Press Note 3 is something which was brought in just after COVID to prevent hostile takeovers, and because India economy went through a bad time, the stock markets were crashing, to prevent foreign investors probably getting into good marquee names at a cheap price. So that was the intention. But what has happened is that provision still stays, and I think it was directed towards some of our neighboring countries where we had border dispute. Now, when we do set up companies in India, or when we are doing these reverse flips, or we are doing acquisitions, every time we are grappling up with Press Note 3. So just wanted to hear your views on what are the top issues which industry is having, and when you are raising funds, how do you approach this?
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Tech Sutra, for having us here, and good afternoon, everybody. So, as you said, the Press Note 3, the intentions were very good, and they were to protect the Indian interest at that time when the COVID was happening. But as we passed through the COVID period, the Indian economy started booming, and now we are at a point where everybody feels like this was not needed. But the biggest issues which the industry is facing at this point is kind of uncertainty. And in uncertainty, it's in both ways. It's like it's taking years together to get an approval. If you are from one of those sectors, then it's taking, even it is extended to, unmanaged sectors also. So it's uncertainty is a major challenge. And then another problem is there is no transparency. There is no data available. So how do one go, like everything works in tax, it's either works on a precedence or the law. So law is anyway very, frugal at this point, in the sense it says it is going to be, the FEMA regulations are going to be notified, but we know that that is also not been notified. Even the uncertainty on the part of, say, beneficial ownership. The beneficial ownership is not defined. So now everybody is taking a different view, like in SBO you are taking 10%, in PMLA you are taking another 10%, or which was earlier 15%. So uncertainty in various things is the major challenge the industry is facing. And the same is again coming back to, say, ESOPs. How those are getting defined? Even for the, if the entity want to raise further capital through bonus shares, rights, there is no certainty. So I think the uncertainty part is the major challenge, and we hope we get some notification or some, finite regulations as to where the, beneficial ownerships are defined, or the countries are, defined, or the sectors are defined where, say, it's not a major, like, say, protected sector defense or something. Then yes, it's understandable from a country's safety point of view. But for the regular sector, I think if this we get some kind of certainty and tax regulations, then it will be very beneficial. Thank you.
So, Sandeep, I wanted to ask you, so the economic survey also recommended the Indian government to probably get rid of Press Note 3, because they had a very interesting logic. They said because of Press Note 3, our trade with China is increasing, we are importing more, and our trade deficit is increasing. So why not allow Chinese companies or other countries, I think it was primarily directed to Chinese companies, so why not allow them to come in and do the value addition in India? So the logic seems to be there, but our various ministers have come publicly and said that there is no review of Press Note 3 which will happen. So from a policy standpoint, I mean, what is your expectation? Do you think this getting resolved anytime soon?
Yeah, thanks, Amit, and thanks, Tax Sutra, and good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I think definitely there is a case for at least liberalizing the press note 3. Uh, so let's say even if as a matter of caution you want to keep it, but I think at least for the industries which doesn't have any security issues as such, at least for those industries the process can be fastened and the approvals should not take years and years. And as I think Mr. Lodha mentioned that there has to be a clear visibility as to what is happening behind. So the data should be publicly available. Okay, how many applications have been filed? How many of those have been disposed of? Whether those are accepted or rejected? And if those have been rejected, what are the reasons for the rejection? So I think basically there are two expectations. One is the process should be fast enough, and there should be clear transparency. Thank you.
No, I think these are very valid points, and let's see what the government does. But it definitely is not in sync with a lot of Make in India initiatives which the government has. Our firm had many proposals stuck up with years and years of no reply, or even getting a rejection without giving any reasons. And many of them were in renewable energies, sectors which are very important for the long-term security of this nation. But unfortunately, because of Press Note 3, those were rejected and have held up plants even for very big corporate houses as well. I just wanted to highlight one interesting...
Can I just add over here? I think even from messaging perspective, 1 year back, we went behind the Chinese companies, very hard. I'm not saying whether they were doing right or wrong. But the messaging perspective, what are we giving? We are saying that if you are here, you should be doing business as per my terms. And those messages are mainly to do because of the defense issues with the border. Now, if you again go back and relook at the Press Note 3, first of all, you need to bring back that trust with the Chinese investors that, hey, if you're doing business in a proper manner, we will basically respect you. Otherwise, doing amendment may not help in that scenario if the industry is not going to get that comfort from the government.
And one small positive point, maybe with the change in the government policy with the change, India-China border issues, getting to some sort of positive news, we may see some changes even this. So I would say it's a positive thing which might happen. So let's see, hope for the best.
Yeah, so post Press Note 3, I think one positive thing that has come is the production linked incentive. I'll not say to counter or to replace the Chinese company coming into India, but at the same time to improve the Indian company's capability to get into the ability that China has. I think production linked incentive scheme is one of the such initiative government has taken, and in light of that I am thinking government may or may not consider taking out Press Note 3. Rather it will empower the companies to go in the direction that matches in China's.
Yeah, that's an interesting viewpoint. And what happened also was these Chinese companies tried out very innovative structures, and one of them was running companies in India by using Indian residents, which were just fronts of these Chinese companies. And that was obviously against the entire intention of the government, and that landed up a lot of these Chinese nationals and those companies under ED investigations. Mr. Badri was saying about Vijay Madan Lal and other judgments and the high-handedness of ED. But I think a lot of stuff was going on which was not right. You had Chinese companies without visas, proper visitor visas doing business. But I think looking into all of that, building proper safeguards and then selectively allowing application, or at least doing it in a time-bound manner, would be very welcome. So now I will move on to my next question, and that is to Mr. Simachal. Sir, I think you come from a city which, along with Bangalore, is the GCC hub of India, and you have most of the GCCs established. Every day we are hearing more and more, especially American companies coming and establishing GCCs. What we have seen in our practice, that gone are the days where GCCs were just the back offices. They are now really gone up in the value chain. You have very senior folks being added to the Indian GCCs. You have global roles in Indian GCCs. You have people filing for patents or at least taking part in that, doing some very sophisticated work. I know there is a company which builds, operate, transfers GCCs under the bot model called ASNR. They have also said that within 5 years, the entire shape or the form of this industry would change. No longer it is just about cost saving in India, it is more about how you can play a strategic part in your entire global operations. So they have become strategic outposts, as we call them. So keeping this in mind, I wanted to understand and probably then go to secondment also, but just on the global role of these people being played while being employed with the Indian GCCs, what kind of tax risk does this pose and what can be done to mitigate that?
Okay. So good afternoon, my friends. First, I like to congratulate India being called as GCC capital of the world. We occupy 20% space in GCC across the globe. The profile of India is like this. We have around 1800 GCCs, 16 lakhs people, and we contribute around 2.5% to our GDC. That is the profile of GCCs in India. And in Hyderabad also, I think it is second or third. The traffic are increasing more and more, so I'm sure the GCCs are also increasing. So that is one analogy I always get. So typically, if you see the journey of GCC earlier, it was a kind of APR, GL, taxation, all these things. Now it has moved to kind of innovation, research analytics, data analytics, in research support, all these things. The profile of GCC has been elevated in recent years. So that has made India as a lucrative place to look for not only the cost saving, but also as a value adding country. Having said that, now let me move to the tax issues. The first thing that comes into mind as far as the tax issue is concerned is POEM, place of effective management. The place of effective management, typically it applies to a company which is not resident in India. GCCs are resident in India. So prima facie it look like the POEM doesn't apply in a GCC structure. But when in a GCC, the global roles are sitting here because in any kind of structure, most of the cases people drive the structure, location of the people drive a particular structure. When the global level is sitting here, head of supply chain, head of R&D, head of analytics, when they sit here in the GCC, so definitely the tax issues come. No more it remains as a captive GCC. It elevates it to a kind of value-adding GCC. Then what are the issues? Does the POEM come into picture? If it takes certain decision on behalf of head office sitting in India, yes, the POEM comes into picture, and there is no second thought about that. To ring fence this, of course, we have to avoid this kind of decision being taken in India. That is one thing I must say. The next issue that comes is a permanent establishment, the PE issue. PE is of three types I have come across in a GCC scenario. One is the fixed place, another is agency PE, third one is the service PE. Fixed place and agency PE are easy to handle because normally the head office doesn't have a control over the location of the GCC, nor the GCC in form at least, they conclude any contract on behalf of head office. So these two P's are out of the scope. The most litigated piece is the service PE. Over the years I have seen that there are litigation only on account of service PE, on account of back office or GCC. The only way the taxpayer has been arguing till now that we do not interact with the customers of head office, we do not do any kind of value addition to the customers of head office, except that we work as a captive unit to head office. But of late, due to change in profile of GCC, now being more value adding profiles are getting added, all these global roles are getting added, definitely these guys will be tending to interact with the customers of the head office, and definitely the profile of GCCs are changing, so that is creating some kind of question whether we can avoid the service fee issues. So definitely it is a business decision. If the people have to sit here and if they have to work from here in India to the customers of head office, then definitely the transfer pricing model has to be revised from the cost plus to an appropriate higher transfer price model to de-risk even from PE perspective. With regard to, now I'll come to the next point, that is GST. So I must congratulate Indian government. I think it has taken lot of steps to simplify the GST litigations, you say, or GST issues. One of such circular now it has come that if you pay a non-resident, if you make a repatriation of the funds to a non-resident, and if you can take full credit, then there is no RCM issue. So this has given a lot of comfort actually, that GST issues may not arise significant in case of the secondment or any kind of payment to the non-resident, wherever we can avail the credit. Yeah, so these are the few things I thought I'll highlight.
Can I just add to what Mr. Mohanty said? See, having a PE is not such a bad thing, okay? As long as from a transfer pricing perspective, what you rightly said, if you're able to attribute the profits properly to the PE. So only on the differential margin you're going to pay tax. So sometimes this tax with respect to the overall cost optimization as far as India is concerned over the Western countries would still benefit the company going for a PE model and then paying the tax. But documentation, your arm's length price, attribution should be all proper with all supporting. I mean, it can't be a shoddy job over there. That's where we all get stuck.
I think one of the issues, especially with these GCCs, is that what we are seeing now is that there's a lot more vertical reporting rather than horizontal reporting. So you will have like an R&D head reporting directly to the head of R&D sitting in US with nothing to do with the India head. Or you have a global chief operating officer sitting out of India. I think there are a lot of issues around reporting, who do they report to, who takes care of their appraisals, what kind of KPIs they have, and all of that ties us to making a big P. It's a definite P risk, and at least what we believe that we'll see a lot of litigation on this going forward as this gets tested, because till now Indian GCCs were really not up to it. They were just doing support functions. That is clearly not the case. Whichever client comes to us is all talking about the talent in India rather than the cost in India. So I think there can be some safeguards, but there is a genuine issue in terms of the operating model and the transfer pricing margins, the characterization, everything has to change now. But one thing which I would suggest is that probably an APA for larger GCCs can really help, especially when their entire operating model has changed, or at least for GCCs which are setting up now with some very, very senior talent. I think that's very important. Now I will jump to our other question. So Rahul and then to Sandeep also. So obviously India has a very robust deal climate now. You have a lot of M&A happening inbound, a bit of outbound as well. So what are some critical issues which you are seeing as tax head of your company as well as being in the industry? So that was question one, and then probably question two to you, Sandeep, is that IBC has also done well. We have a lot of multinationals bidding in IBC. So what are some key tax issues which we are facing in IBC, not only on the technical at the time of the resolution plan, but also on the ground when you have to give effect to that resolution plan with various tax authorities? So I'll start with you, Rahul. Why don't you speak about M&A?
Yeah, so this, first of all, this view is more professional than my, again, I'm saying it's not a company view, but yeah, I'm just giving as a professional over here. See, goodwill is something which is today not available for tax shelter, right, as far as M&A deals are concerned. And when we do the purchase price allocation, we have seen a lot of innovative structures over here to mitigate the risk of tax shelter by allocating goodwill towards customer contracts and other intangibles, which to my mind, if there is a commercial rationale to do that, please go ahead and do that. But just because you want to take a tax shelter, don't try and change the character or a form of a asset from goodwill to customer contracts. So something that everybody should be mindful in a M&A deal. It's not a KPI which you want to show to the board that you have achieved a tax shelter in this year. But 10 years down the line, who never knows? You are not there, but there will be adjustment over there when the assessment takes place, when the matter goes for litigation. So be mindful of the fact that We always love to blame the legacy, but we are also legacy, right, at some point of time. So these decisions have to be taken in an informed manner, signed off by senior councils before, doing this kind of innovative products. Secondly, in any merger deal or any acquisition deal, there are certain clauses like non-compete. And sometimes there is no value attributable to non-compete. We have seen department picking up these issues based on even any press release which says that XYZ company is trying to merge with somebody else. What is the non-compete clause in that agreement? What is the value? How do you attribute that value? There is no I would say precedence in GST as such. How do value be attributed? But any kind of non-compete value on which GST is paid, that's a complete blockage in your books. Because the credit has to be absorbed over a period of time. And you can't just be doing a cross charge and then trying to adjust that credit through various other states. So that even if you put a minimum value, please see to it that there is a value attached, attributed, so that even if there is adjustment, you are aware that how much adjustment should be there, rather than shooting in the dark. The third factor would be in terms of your, I'm not going to speak about indemnities and all because tomorrow we have a full-fledged discussion on M&A. But in terms of your documentation, in terms of not GST, but
Talking about indemnity?
indemnities are already covered, but indemnities are, the problem with indemnities is how do you enforce those indemnities? Sorry, arbitration. There should be a proper arbitration clause in any agreements, and our arbitration clause should be in a neutral venue rather than in India. Most of the times we don't pay attention to these clauses, which are very important in any M&A deal. Because arbitration will help you to make a resolution much more in a faster manner rather than going through the normal court process. So I think these are some of the areas which people should be mindful when they are doing the M&A deals.
Just to add 2 points. One is I'd like to talk about our tendency to characterize a particular transaction into a slump sale. So if it is a real slump sale, it is a real slump sale. There is no second thought, but to ensure that we don't pay GST and GST credit is accumulated, it is a tendency to avoid a kind of transfer and, structure it to a slump sale. That is one thing I would like to talk about. Second thing, taking the point from goodwill, actually, if we structure a transaction miserly, saying that only 1%, 2%, 3% in a particular transaction goodwill is there, there is a particular threshold that there cannot be any kind of any deal where minimum there has to be kind of 5 to 6% goodwill amount will be there. At least if you do not agree to that or do not get into that range, at least the entire value may be questioned. Is it that substantial value is there in the goodwill? The tax officer will tend to question. So to avoid that, we have to be very fair and reasonable, calling out what is the goodwill amount embedded in a particular transaction, particular deal. The last point I want to make is the kind of litigation that I'm seeing right now in GST is, if you go to Rule 41, it says that you have to transfer, if you are doing a slump sale, you have to transfer the input tax credit to the transferee. If you go to Rule 42, it is talking about a rule-based transfer, which doesn't apply to a kind of merger, amalgamation, all these things. So the tax officer are tending to get into Rule 42 rather than 41, and that amount is coming to very high amount. So, of course, that is not that is not the right stand according to me, but that is a new trend of litigation happening. So when you are designing a structure as a slump sale, that is another thing you have to keep in mind. Just a few things I thought I'll add.
Just to add last point, when you do the PPA allocation, don't try to do kitchen sinking to the extent possible. We always have the habit of doing a kitchen sinking and pushing all the tax risk as a part of PPA and closing it. But that basically balloons the goodwill part, and then there is no shelter available over there. Also, it doesn't send a good message to the investing community because you have blown up the goodwill in such a manner that will be tested for impairment every year and where there is no optimization possible. So be mindful what you want to push, what you don't want to push, how much risk you want to kitchen sink, how much risk you want to keep on your books and carry it further. That is something which is really important.
We're running short of time. We'll quickly go to IBC now. So, yes, Sandeep, please.
Yeah, so if we talk about IBC, basically, apart from several other provisions, the two provisions of IBC, that is 31 and 53, are really important. So 31 basically talks about that the buyer would get the asset on a clean slate basis. And 53 basically is a waterfall mechanism which basically prescribes a hierarchy of the dues, primarily that financial creditors would prevail over the operational creditors. But what we have seen is recently is that there was a judgment in the matter of rainbow papers in the context of Gujarat VAT, wherein the Supreme Court held that the, the government dues would be categorized as a secured creditor rather than as an operational creditors. Then there was another Supreme Court judgment after a few months in the matter of Raman Ispat, which was related to electricity dues, which basically overturned rainbow papers. Then rainbow papers, then a revision petition was filed for rainbow papers. Then the Supreme Court upheld rainbow papers, saying that okay, the context of both the judgments are different. So, and the ratio basically comes is that the government dues can be categorized as secured creditors. So the problem that comes is that when you get the asset, typically you will not get all your past tax demands cleared. You have to really go to the ground, talk to the tax officers and get those demands cleared. And obviously on the ground there is some resistance. For example, in one of our client case, obviously we are facing resistance on the Gujarat VAT, but at least fortunately, if we talk about other laws, GST laws specifically say that okay, the IBC provisions will prevail over the GST dues. So I think that is something which is positive, but the thing is that if you have any such laws where the state departments categorize their dues as secured creditors, then you are basically going to face a challenge. Then coming on to the direct taxes part, there are several provisions like obviously you will be doing several write-offs of lenders and other dues, which could be categorized as income under Section 41 or the recent amendment carried out under Section 28(5). So I think those are something which can be taken care, which can be navigated to a certain extent by preparing two set of financials just before the liquidation date, where you do all the write-offs in the older balance sheet and then carry out new balances, the new financials when the new management takes over. Then you have other direct tax provisions like 56(2)(10), because typically what would happen is some of the lenders would get their dues converted into equity, which would typically be less than the fair market value. So can those conversions be categorized as income in the hand of the lenders? But I mean, our view is that 56(2)(10) basically an anti-abuse provision, and since I think it is possible to contend that the NCLT order was not a device for any kind of abuse of tax provisions. So I think reasonable argument can be taken that 56(2)(10) should not apply, but you never know. So I think the key is here is that the resolution plan is a very effective document in these scenarios. So what we have seen is if you put all the reliefs that you need, you can put those in the resolution plans, and if the NCLT approves, or you would have some protection available, so that on the NCLT order you can go to the tax forums and you can fight your case and you can seek those reliefs. You can contend that okay, NCLT has taken care of everything and these reliefs have been allowed considering that these are necessary for the purpose of the revival of the business. But again, I'm saying that everyone is going to face some kind of resistance from the tax department, and there is a lot of work on ground. And then there is the issue of criminal liability as well. We have seen that there have been several proceedings going under different, for example, there could be different authorities like CBI, Enforcement Directorate, which could be after the earlier promoters. So for any past dues, can they keep those proceedings in the name of the company even after the acquisition or maybe the new promoters? I think there are sufficient judgments which provide that okay, I think those proceedings cannot continue. You can keep those for the old promoters, but I think the new management needs to be shielded of all those. So in the end, basically, I would like to summarize is that I think the purpose of IBC was that when you take over an asset, you should focus on the revival of the business. Now it is kind of absurd and unfortunate that apart from that, the new management also has to focus their energies on fighting these litigations or getting these dues and everything, or getting these dues cleared. And I think the another important issue is the carry forward of losses, because obviously at the time of acquisition, you would have considered those losses as an assets. So Section 79 has an express exception, I would say, which say that, okay, in case of IBC proceedings, you can carry forward your losses, but again, I would say that you will have to go to the tax department for allowing allowing the carry forward. Yeah, thank you.
I think one of the classical things which we have seen is that you go to the tax office with a resolution plan, and the tax officer is going to tell you that I was not even aware of this. When did this happen? And because of that, they will say, oh, we are going to appeal, and we were not even given a chance. Then you go on explaining that once the resolution plan is final, the tax department cannot file any fresh claims. And there was a so they will say that the resolution professional never reached out to them. There was no communication. So you go to the resolution professional, take out the records, tell them that it was communicated, but the tax department did not do the exercise of putting down the claims. So I think a lot of these things happen. Write-off of liabilities can result in a taxable position. So you need those losses to be there. And another problem is that do you take assessed losses or do you take return losses? Because in most of these cases, assessments have happened, they are in appeals. Our position is to take return losses only. But then IBC, the resolution plan is only to the extent of the claims and not for the ongoing proceedings. So there's a lot to do. I would say the resolution plan serves as your Bible, and you should make a good plan by working with your lawyers to make sure that each and every single thing is captured. And yes, the objective is to start on a clean slate. So we hope that that would work for most of the acquirers. I'll just quickly jump to the next question, and we're going to combine the next two questions just in the interest of time. So it's to you, Mr. Mohanty. So the government is doing a lot towards tax certainty, but do you really think there is tax certainty? I mean, we have a lot of statements coming from the government. They have done good things. And then as a follow-up is to all of you that we have President Trump now coming starting from next year. All of us know how the first term went. US continues to remain a very attractive destination, and the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, headed by Musk and Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy, they want to make it even more attractive. So what can India do with our tax law is also due for an overhaul, and we had the statement from the finance minister, the press release. So what can India do to remain competitive? So we'll start with the first, is there real tax certainty, and then what can we do?
Yeah, thank you. I think Trump is appearing in all the questions, whatever I noticed so far. Okay, coming to the first question about the tax certainty, that is a really difficult question to answer, but let me answer it. Government really has taken the recent years quite good steps. First thing, there has been a reduction in retrospective amendment, except two latest amendment, one with regard to goodwill, another to indexation. The retro amendment has come down compared to a decade ago. That is one positive thing. Second thing, the abolition of angel tax. That is the second good thing that has happened. That has improved the image of India abroad, actually. That is second thing. The third thing is recently, repeal of 9610 in GST. That is one thing. And cross-charge circular. So these are the things what GST Council taken the step in a consultative manner. Those things are also adding to a lot of tax certainty. Okay, and fourth thing is of course the direct tax code that is going to come, and we have to see how it becomes our life simple. Having said that, all these things are all positive directions. I want to set up the tone what as a foreigner would expect from Government of India. I'll just share my experience very quickly about two hearings that I've attended in foreign countries. One hearing before Supreme Court of Mexico, the another hearing before a tax officer in UK. A tax officer in UK actually, he was apprehensive about the tax depreciation claim. Who had acquired a plant along with a company. He was not sure how much of depreciation he should allow. So he visited the company and we had a very good chat. Then he told that, okay, let us go and visit the plant and let us see all the plant and machinery are there or not. Then we offered him that, instead of visiting plant, we have all the cameras here. Why not to sit here in the meeting room and all corners of plant we can show you, and whatever machinery you can choose, we can go to that particular machine and you can check that. Then he told it is fine. I mean, he completed his entire inspection in 30 to 40 minutes and he was happy with that. And he went back and to our surprise, we got a nil order. Okay. In our another assessment, same officer, he had raised a small demand. When the demand came to the head office, I was surprised to see this is the demand. In case you have any problem in paying this, in case you have any funds issue, I am okay to hear that. Please come to my office in this time. So that kind of language in a tax order, seeing it was quite surprise to me. That is with regard to UK experience. With regard to Mexico experience, actually we had a recharacterization issue. The loan, whatever we had given to our subsidiary, it was recharacterized as equity and interest was disallowed. It was a big transfer pricing issue that has gone for last 8-9 years. Matter reached to Supreme Court and the lawyer was sitting and I was also sitting. It was a small room. Supreme Court judge is sitting along with the department representative. When the argument started in Spanish, the judge told, who is he? Then I told that I am company's representative. Then he told, then let us start the argument in English. And to my surprise, he asked me to argue the case rather than the lawyer. I was a bit reluctant, but I started arguing. To my utter surprise, the hearing got completed and same day evening, we got a order from the Supreme Court of Mexico saying that these areas allowed in your favor, these area disallowed in your favor against you, and this is an interim order, the final order will come under this and this date. So when I talk about the kind of transparency, when I talk about the kind of certainty, that has to be in the interpretation of law first. When that happens, the value of our India, it increases before anybody outside India. That is sum and substance of the story.
I think I'll just say that on lighter note, if there is a certainty, the half of the conference room will be empty, right? We'll be all out of the jobs and searching for a job in some of the global centers, Hyderabad. Yeah. Sorry. But I would not say certainty, I would say more the intent. And the government did bite the bullet, in fact, a little bit early, little bit late, but little bit early, little bit late in the sense there was a commitment given in 2023 to withdraw the e-com levy. They did it in 24. They were supposed to do it after Pillar 2, but they did bite the bullet. We saw MFN again. Probably the courts are getting swayed by the self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and hence that judgment came, which is deviating from the OECD model. And OECD is not the future. I think in the morning also somebody was mentioning about UN model versus OECD model in the first session. So I think the intent of the government is much more important rather than certainty. Uncertainty will be definitely there. See, obviously with the population of 1.4 billion, we have to pay the price for that diversity, right? The diversity sometimes comes as a boon and sometimes as a price as well. Less than 10% of the taxpayers are paying taxes and we are not even contributing much to the GDP. So uncertainty will be definitely there, but yes, there could be the certain things which will be there on the ground level in terms of reducing the enforcement people, like you have a state intelligence in GST, you have a DGGI, you have a circle audit. I mean, do you require so many agencies? Can you not trust? You have seen the trend of the collection, which is more than 170,000 lakh crores every month. So why do you need those so many agencies? Why can't you trust the business? I think something that sort has to be also looked at from the government perspective. And I also would like to just spend a half a minute on the UK's HMRC. And in UK, when the hearing happens, the panel consists of a domestic tax person, the international tax person, and transfer pricing. It's such a smooth panel. And in India, you have to refer to a TPO. Why you require TPO? Why can't the AO do it? We have a risk-based assessment in place. Why the AO cannot do it? Why you require so many levels to go through the file? I mean, that is something we should look at as a matured jurisdiction going forward.
I think we are really short on time. I'll just take very quickly one point, and that was on last speaker's, Mr. Badri's comment on multiple agencies. So I can just tell you that in India, it's a crime to go bankrupt or have an NPA. The moment you have an NPA, the bankers would allege that you have siphoned off funds. They will refer you to forensic audit. Based on the forensic audit, CBI charge sheet would get filed. The CBI charge sheet is filed, there is a raid as well. The moment that happens, by default, the enforcement directorate come into the picture. The ED raids happen, and you get stuck in the limbo. So a lot of people, obviously, we have cases, you have promoters who have done wrong things, but a lot of genuine people have genuine cases. So it's not just the tax authorities, it's like he was saying, there's so many other multiple agencies, and one after the other you get slammed. It's not that you will only have a tax issue. If you're a reasonably big group, you will have all sort of government departments after you. So I think that is something which really needs to change in this country, that is really jittering investors, especially what we saw with some very large Chinese companies, what happened. So I think this is one point which I wanted to bring about. I'll just quickly ask Mr. Loda to make one quick comment, and Mr. Mohanty, because I think we are already due and we can take questions. Okay, probably just, okay. So one last question, it's a comment.
So basically, for the foreign investors, it will make it even easier. And as the government is talking about reviving the Income Tax Act of 1960, when they are doing a comprehensive review. So if the language get eased up in a really taxpayer-friendly manner, and then on the compliances, if the ease, it gets more easy for the taxpayers. I think that will be looked by the foreign investors in a positive way. And which I think is probably going to happen the way it's been talked about.
Fair comment. So thanks a lot. We are there for at lunch, so feel free to ask your questions. I'm sorry we have encroached on your lunch time, but thanks a lot for this opportunity. I hope you enjoyed the panel, and we are looking forward to the rest 2 days of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maheshwari, for this dynamic discussion. I would invite our panel to please come forward for a group photo. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch, and we will be back in 50 minutes. Yes, thank you.